Adam is joining me now. Great to see you. Great work, by the way. Your latest report went viral. It was all over social media. I mean, these people, these intelligent people, what is happening in America?
I mean, they truly are the worst of the worst. You know, in the last 2 decades, I've trained college activists in 48 states, multiple Canadian provinces, Mexico City. I don't think I've ever encountered a crowd as disgusting as the people I encountered in Cambridge at Harvard. These are wretched, hateful, violent individuals. It's outrageous.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. And now Harvard's president realizing that from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea means eradicating Jews from Israel is anti-Semitic because, I mean, if you look at a map, where do they go then in the Middle East? They don't even know what they're chanting. What was your takeaway from this report?
You know, you make a great point. Do they know what they're chanting or not? We've got to decide. Are they incredibly ignorant or are they openly calling for ethnic cleansing? I mean, I hope that they're merely ignorant rather than endorsing genocide. These are horribly hateful people who've been coddled for far too long. For decades on college campuses, these radical anti-Semites, nobody has stood up to them. The administration has kowtowed to them and let them do whatever they want. The Jewish organizations, and I say this as a Jew, have behaved a bit like cowards who think that the best way to deal with a bully is with kindness. I think we should deal with kindness to everybody we meet, but bullies view kindness as weakness.
Yes.
We should never use violence against them, but they must be held accountable for their actions.
I mean, Adam, it's clear that academia has failed our students. When you were there on campus and you're seeing all of this, are you thinking to yourself, where do we go from here?
You know, yes, and I think the only real solution is we dismantle diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives.
We're going to talk about that
anywhere we can find them. That's a huge part of where this comes from. But most importantly, Americans, Jews, they need to understand that this isn't just merely a fight against anti-Semites. This is a fight of Western civilization and classical liberal values against radical totalitarian butchers. Israel's just on the front lines of that fight.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up DEI because our next guest will be talking about that. She was a DEI director and was fired, so she has a lot of insight into that. I got to ask you about this, though. A report came out about from Honest Reporting, raising ethical questions that some mainstream media outlets worked with Gaza-based photojournalists who were embedded with Hamas on October 7th. This raises a lot of questions because in Gaza, there are many individuals who pose as journalists. We see them on social media, and many are nothing more than influencers. How do we know they're not effectively mouthpieces of Hamas? And then we see this report by Honest Reporting.
It's truly outrageous. And, you know, we always talk about how these days you can't tell the difference between a journalist and an activist. Well, it seems you might not be able to tell the difference between a journalist and a terrorist. Because that's the sort of thing that we're dealing with in a situation like this. Now, 30 years ago, people might have said, no, I don't believe it. It can't possibly be true. But trust in mainstream media is at an all-time low, so much so that even with little evidence to prove it just yet, many of us are absolutely, that sounds like something that would happen in the media because that's how little respect that Americans have for the media because, of course, that's how little respect the media has for Americans.
Yeah, but how do you hold them accountable for this? This is not okay.
Sure. Well, I think, first of all, if you find that people are working with a terrorist organization, well, there are laws against that in America. Right. And does CNN want to come out and say that they're working people who are breaking what would be laws in America? I'd like to see them defend that. Does MSNBC, does NBC want to come out and say those things? These are discussions that need to be had, and these quote-unquote news outlets need to be held accountable for it.
Well, it's interesting because the Associated Press does not call Hamas terrorists. They're militants. And what happened on October 7th is not militant. They killed innocent men, women, and children, butchered them, barbarians. I want to quickly touch on this. What's happened to you lately? You've been swatted for the 6th time this week. What's going on? Yeah,
that's exactly right. The first time, October 27th at 2 a.m, someone called local law enforcement and said I had a gun to my wife's head. Instantly, a half a dozen heavily armed deputies came to our home. They got a code from someone and went inside our home. And had we been there at the time, thankfully we were out of state, had we been there and moved the wrong way because we were startled at 2 a.m. by a half a dozen SWAT team members, we might have been killed. They did that a second time and a half dozen heavily armed deputies arrived. They've done 4 subsequent calls after those 2. Thankfully, the county got better at handling it. But these people are attempting murder against us. And it's so funny you mentioned the Associated Press because I had a call with an AP reporter last week and he said, are you concerned with your actions about violence? And I said, yeah, I've been swatted a bunch. I get threats on my life every day. I'm getting harassed. My wife, my parents, my staff, they're all getting harassed. And he said, no, I mean violence on campus. And I said, oh, yeah, Jewish students are being attacked. And he said, oh, no, I mean, for the Palestinian students. And I said, well, I haven't heard of a single report, thankfully, of any Palestinian students being harmed. And he said, well, yeah, but I've spoken with some of them, and they sound scared.
Oh, okay.
We're literally getting threats on our life. Kids are getting attacked, but the Palestinian students feel scared. So that's the real story.
Well, right. Just like VP Kamala Harris came out and talked about it as well, and she's concerned about Islamophobia when really the hatred is towards the Jewish students.
That's right. That's right. And we don't endorse Islamophobia. That's terrible. We wouldn't want violence towards any Palestinian student. That would be horrible as well. But why is that the lead story when it's a hypothetical, when it doesn't exist? Why did they claim that we are doxing people when we're not? We use the names and photos that were in the student newspaper. They called us a doxing truck. Yet there's no reports of the fact that I get doxed day in, day out. They share my home phone number. They share my home address on social media day in, day out. That's not a story to the AP. That's not a story to MSNBC or ABC News. But us sharing the photos from a student newspaper, they call that doxing.
Because, Adam, you know this. They're creating the narrative. They always do. They go out there and they see whatever the narrative is. They're creating this narrative. Adam Guillette with Accuracy Media. I want to thank you for being here. Please stay safe.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Of course, and continue to expose the truth out there. Up next, the growing realization of the destructive nature